All right, so before we get into the presentation today, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that the land we are streaming from is the unceded territory of Endocina, belonging to the Abenaki people whose traditions and culture have stewarded this land for thousands of years and continue to this day. We thank them for their strength and resilience in caring for this land, and we aspire to uphold our responsibilities according to their example. I encourage you all to take the first step in researching the native tribe in your area and the original stewards of the land you are streaming from. Thank you for joining me for this important land acknowledgement. So my name is Joey Sullivan, and welcome to our virtual Working Woodlands workshops. I am the one-year Natural Resources Management intern at both Marsh-Billings-Rockefeller National Historical Park, as well as St. Gaudens National Historical Park. One of my projects at the parks is coordinating our Working Woodlands workshop series, which are designed to engage and educate nature enthusiasts and landowners in how they experience woodlands. These workshops normally take place in person, but due to COVID-19, we will be doing them virtually over Zoom. These workshops are co-hosted by Billings Farm and Museum and co-sponsored by Vermont Woodlands Association and Vermont Coverts. So I encourage you to check out their websites and see some of their events of a similar interest as these. Today, I'm excited to bring to you all a workshop on becoming a community scientist, presented by Julia Pupko, the Community Science Outreach Naturalist at the Vermont Center for Ecostudies. I hope I got your title right there. She's going to introduce the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas project, which is using community science to collect data for real-world research needs. And also provide a tutorial on how to use Inaturalist, which is the community science platform researchers use to collect data. I think I have taken up enough time now. So Julia, the floor, or I guess in this case, I should say the screen, is all yours.
Thank you. Can everyone see my screen okay, and can you hear me okay?
I can see your screen and hear you.
Excellent. All right. Well, without further ado, I will begin. Joey nailed the introduction. I am one of the current AmeriCorps members serving at the Vermont Center for Ecostudies, specifically working with the Vermont Atlas of Life team, which is a sub-research group within the Vermont Center for Ecostudies. And before I begin this presentation, I just want to note that the example of the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas and how to engage with the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas as a community scientist is just one example of how you can use iNaturalist to engage with research that's occurring in your area or starting your own research project using iNaturalist. So if you are not in Vermont, never fear, you can still apply iNaturalist to Lady Beetles or anything else in your area and apply what I'm going to talk about in your own context. So I wanted to begin by asking what people think of when they think of a ladybug. And if that is something like the photo on the screen, a small, rather circular insect that has a nice red pair of wing covers with a bunch of black spots. You can definitely pop in the chat if this aligns with what you think of when you think of a lady beetle. And I'll just give you a moment for that if you want to do that. So actually, lady beetles, while that is one type of lady beetle, that previously shown photo was actually an Asian lady beetle, which is one of the invasive lady beetle species in Vermont. And the ones that you can see on the screen are just a couple different examples of the wide variety of lady beetle species that we have in Vermont. They come in a bunch of different shapes and sizes. Some are only 1 to 2 millimeters long. Some are more like 10 to 11 millimeters long. So they really vary in size, in texture, and shape, and also in habitat use. This leads us into why lady beetles as a group of species matters so much, in addition to their intrinsic value as a beautiful taxonomic group. So native lady beetles have evolved with our ecosystems, and many have specialized to actively hunt specific pest types such as aphids, mealybugs, or scale insects. There are around 475 different species of lady beetle occurring in North America alone. And some of our native species have also adapted to hunt introduced pests as well, such as one species we have in Vermont called the twice-stabbed lady beetle, which has become very highly associated with beech bark disease since its introduction in the early 1900s. Additionally, lady beetles are a very recognizable and common invertebrate group and are very sensitive to environmental conditions, so they have been proposed as an indicator species. Kind of on top of all of that, without native lady beetle species, there is a chance that our ecosystems may become imbalanced because aphid populations, along with mealybugs and scale insect and the other small soft-bodied insects that lady beetles eat, may become so numerous that they start damaging trees and other plant species that we have. And then the final note on this slide is that lady beetles exist in basically any terrestrial ecosystem type you can think of, from coniferous and deciduous forests to meadows and farmlands, and even wetlands and marshes, and provide very important pest control in all of those places. Nationally, our lady beetle species are not doing too well. Across the United States and Canada, there have been declines of multiple different native species, and this is thought to be due to a combination of factors, which you can see on the screen. To dive into those factors a little bit more, non-native lady beetle introductions mostly have occurred from the 1980s on in terms of non-native species becoming established. Many were actually introduced earlier. For example, some were introduced in the 1950s for pest control purposes, but many actually became established accidentally. And these species, such as the Asian lady beetle, which you saw on the first slide, typically will outcompete native lady beetle species for food and habitat, and will also actually eat native lady beetle larvae. All lady beetle species are cannibalistic, which is kind of interesting, but the non-native ones will typically grow faster and will very much enjoy eating the native lady beetle larvae and eggs, whereas the native lady beetles will only really eat other native lady beetle larvae and eggs and won't really go for the invasive ones as much. So that kind of causes a disproportionate pressure on the native species. With these introduced species come some introduced diseases, which there is not a ton of research on yet, but usually introduced diseases don't do very good things for native populations. And then on top of all of this, land use changes, so the kind of fall of small farms and change of a lot of land to urban areas, along with pesticide use, has also been thought to contribute to these declines. So to zoom in more, how are native lady beetles doing in Vermont? To give a little bit of background context for this, in 2018, the VAL team, so the Vermont Atlas of Life team within the Vermont Center for Ecostudies, acquired this historic checklist that was completed in 1976. After digitizing this, we realized that there was very few modern records on lady beetles in Vermont. And this kind of made us wonder, well, are there data that exist in other documents or collections how are the lady beetles doing currently? What ones still exist? So we began digitizing records and historic Lady Beetle collections from places such as the Cornell University Lost Ladybug Project, the Lady Beetle collections at UVM, Middlebury, Vermont Forest Parks and Recreation, and also collected all of the research grade Inaturalist photos of lady beetles, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And at that point came to the end of data in existence. We had around 1,600 records at that point. And we were sort of like, well, we should figure out what is happening with Vermont's current lady beetle fauna because we don't know, and they are very important. Through gathering these records, including those on iNaturalist, we have acquired data on 35 native species of lady beetle and 7 introduced species in Vermont, totaling at 42 species. And as of 2019, 13 of our native species had been missing for over 40 years since that 1976 document was published. So this really spurred the question of, have these species gone extinct in Vermont? So have they been extirpated? Do they still exist in low numbers? And we want to find out so we can better inform conservation efforts, including native lady beetle reintroduction if necessary, and maybe start to think about ways to combat native or non-native species if that seems to be one of the issues facing native lady beetle species in Vermont. So this is just a visual representation of the changes in lady beetle populations over time. You can see this is around when that 1976 Lady Beetle survey was published. And it is important to note that some of the Lady Beetle species in Vermont have been discovered recently. So they are not, that's why there aren't 42 species reflected here. But you can see that there's just this huge dip in the number of lady beetle species recorded from 1980 until around 2012. And then you can see where we are currently. And although we do not have the data to statistically say whether or not the introduction of non-native species caused these declines because we are lacking so many records, it is important to note that 2 non-native species, the 7-spotted and the variegated lady beetle, were both established in Vermont in the 1980s, while the Asian lady beetle and the 14-spotted lady beetle, which are 2 other non-native species, were established in Vermont in the 1990s. So it looks a little bit suspicious. We just don't have the statistical power to say for sure whether these introductions have caused these declines. As a result, as I stated before, we began the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas, which piloted in 2020, to begin trying to find answers. And the start of the answers comes with simply determining which lady beetles still exist in Vermont. And to do this, to find these lady beetles, we are applying a community science framework. And before I go into what is community science and why community science, we are using iNaturalist as the base for our community scientists to participate in our survey and contribute data. So as to what is community science and why community science, I have another graphic. And so essentially, community science is when naturalists within their own community, typically it's when they start their own project, but in this case, since we are a research institution or a research organization, this is when community volunteers become involved in our projects and contribute data. And community science has multiple benefits, including community engagement with research, which raises awareness for conservation, reduce research costs, and also increases the chances of finding beetles. An example is the Cornell Lost Ladybug project, which also utilized community volunteer data and led to the discovery of 2-spotted and 9-spotted lady beetle populations in New York, which had been previously thought to be extirpated in New York. And you can see with this is the number of lady beetle records over time. You can see again, this is where that 1976 Lady Beetle survey was completed. But overall, the number of records are really, really low over time until the Vermont Atlas of Life on iNaturalist started in 2012. You can see the numbers kind of start jumping up again. And then with the pilot year of the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas, again, that was in 2020, you can see this massive spike in the number of lady beetles recorded. So again, we use iNaturalist as the way to collect our community volunteer contributions. And iNaturalist is a free platform that connects people with science and provides crowdsourced species identification. iNaturalist provides a really, really great platform for anyone who is interested in the natural world of differing interests and skill levels to all come together and form this really amazing community where you can learn from each other, help each other with identifications, and also contribute to science, because the basic unit of iNaturalist in general is called an observation. And basically what an observation is one interaction with an organism, a wild living organism, during one time. So say you have a tree in your backyard and you take a photo of it in the middle of winter and then upload those photos to iNaturalist. You could take photos of that same tree in the spring when it starts leafing out and upload those to iNaturalist as well, because even though it's the same organism, you're taking photos of it at different times. And likewise, if you take photos of, say, a bee on a flower, what you would want to do is actually duplicate your observation in iNaturalist. So you have one observation where you identify what the bee is, and then another one, even if it's the same photos, where you identify what the flower is, because as I said, the basic unit is for one organism at one place during time. And on that note, I'm going to jump into iNaturalist and show you all a couple of the really good features of iNaturalist. So the first thing that I wanted to go over is called the Explore tab. And in Explore, as you can see, once my map loaded, Vermont is highlighted here, meaning that that is the geographic location that I have set iNaturalist to zoom in on when I go to my Explore tab. And all of these red squares here are observations that people have uploaded in Vermont. So if I zoom in more, you can see that all of these little teardrops were making up those red squares, and each one of these is an observation. So if you click on an observation and then, whoops, oh, there we go. You get taken to this page that gives you a bunch of background information on what the observation is. In this case, it is a sign that a white-tailed deer was here. And you can see that this observation says research grade up top. And down here, you can see that there is a second person that has identified what Jay Shapiro identified this organism as. And basically, this secondary identification is what confirms that this actually is white-tailed deer scat and not something else, and basically just validates what the organism is. And now this observation can be utilized by scientists because it is confirmed. And you can also see that you have a section here where you can add notes to the organism, and then there's a bunch of information on the side that you can fill out as somebody just using iNaturalist. So if this was a photo, say, of an actual deer instead of the scat, you could fill out whether it was alive or dead, and then its life stage or sex if you knew that information, which just helps researchers better utilize the information that are in these observations. Another really amazing feature within iNaturalist is if you either search for a taxonomic group or you click on the organism within the observation, you get taken to this organism's taxonomic page. And these pages exist both for singular species and also for larger taxonomic groups. So I could type in ungulates or fungi or lichens or whatever wild living organism group that I wanted in the search bar. And within this page, you get a lot of really nice information, which is kind of curated by the location that you select. So keep an eye on this map here in the right-hand side. When I filter for Vermont, you can see that that map changed a little bit. And basically what seasonality means is this is the number of observations of white-tailed deer. And you can see it's broken down into verifiable, which means that there is a photo, location, time, and date, and research grade, meaning that the observation has been verified each month. Additionally, you have tabs for history, so the number of white-tailed deer observations that have been uploaded over time, life stage, the breakdown of adult, juvenile, and then those with no annotation, and sex, male, female, cannot be determined, and no annotation. And additionally, you have down here a map of where white-tailed deer have been observed all across. In this case, it's zooming in more on Vermont, but you can unselect the Vermont location and you get a map across their range. You have an About tab linking to Wikipedia with a couple other areas that you can go for more information. And a note here is that the Wikipedia information varies depending on the species. Some have a lot of information, some really don't have much, especially when you're getting into some of the beetle species. You also have taxonomy, status, and this will, the conservation status will, what is displayed will change a little bit based on what you have selected at the top for location. And also while I'm here, in iNaturalist, when you upload these observations, you are able to obscure the observations geoprivacy. Say you take photos at your own house and you don't want that location uploaded to iNaturalist, there is an option to obscure that geoprivacy so other people aren't able to see, you know, the pin right by your house if that's something that makes you feel more comfortable. And in my personal opinion, the most helpful part of these taxonomy pages in iNaturalist is the similar species tab, because this shows you, again, when you filter by place, it will change the number of species located here, but it shows you that everything that white-tailed deer have been misidentified as, or on the flip side, they have been misidentified as white-tailed deer within iNaturalist. And sometimes, so this is a really good way to start learning how to differentiate, say, a white-tailed deer and a very similar species, the mule deer. But, you know, as you can see, you do sometimes have weird other species that really look nothing like a white-tailed deer that get mixed in here anyway. But that is a very helpful tab for beginning to learn new species and how to tell them apart. The second thing that I wanted to highlight in iNaturalist is the Identify tab. And this tab has, you can see here, you can filter by species, location, you have more filter options to better curate what observations are getting pulled up. You can choose whether the organisms you're looking for are introduced or threatened. You can select a wider taxonomic group, so, you know, a large group like birds or arachnids or plants. Also, just a brief note, this also exists in the Explore tab, these filter options, which is really nice for being able to see which organisms exist in your area. And then after you filled out some of this information, you would just be able to click Update Search. And you have a bunch of organisms here that need to be identified. And basically what you can do is click on a picture and look at it. And then if you have, again, the map here showing where this observation comes from, and you are able to either agree with it. So I do agree that this is yellow birch. And watch this little needs ID tab here. See how it just popped up to research grade? That's because I just confirmed the identification of yellow birch. But say this was actually a black birch, what I could do is click Add ID here, and then just simply add in the correct species, maybe leave the user a note as to why I think that it's not a yellow birch, and then click Save. And basically what that would do is would be allow for other people to come in or the user themselves to either agree with me, agree with the original user, or suggest a totally new ID to try and truly determine what this organism is. And then up here you have a bunch of other options that you can go through. So there's the artificial intelligence of iNaturalist is suggesting that this is a yellow birch. You have annotations. So again, these are a little bit more limited since this is a plant. So you're not going to get some of the other annotations in here that you would get for animals. And then you also have a data quality tab that you can go through.
Hey, Julia, that was my yellow birch ID from this morning.
That's really funny.
Thanks for confirming it.
You're welcome. Also, before I go over how to upload an observation on iNaturalist, VCE has a bunch of different iNaturalist videos and resources that we provide. So if any of you want to learn more about iNaturalist, I can definitely provide you with those resources. I just didn't want to go too in-depth in iNaturalist because it's very easy to get overwhelmed with everything you can do in it. And I didn't want to lose everyone. So how you upload your own observations to iNaturalist is click that green upload tab that I just did. You are either able to upload from a CSV or from another platform where you may have photos, or you can upload them directly from your computer. And then what you do is simply go into the folder that you have the photos you want to upload, click on the first photo, single click, hold down Shift on your keyboard, and then click on the last photo that you wish to upload and click Open. And then once your photos have uploaded to iNaturalist, each photo will have its individual plate here. But again, since the unit of iNaturalist is an observation, which is, it can be a series of photos, but just of one organism at one place in time. You want to make sure that if you have multiple photos of the same organism, that you group those. So how you would do that is simply hold down Shift on your keyboard and click the white part of these, I call these like plates or tablets, of all of the photos of the same individual, and then you simply click combine. And now you can see that you have all of these lady beetle photos. This is a 14-spotted lady beetle in the same observation because that's just of one individual. I don't know why iNaturalist really likes identifying certain lady beetles as spot croakers, but that obviously is not correct. So from here, you can add these species. And if you give iNaturalist a second after you click, the artificial intelligence in iNaturalist will suggest different species. And it actually is correct. This is in fact a 14-spotted lady beetle. But if you're not sure what the species is, you don't have to take a guess. You can just type in a larger group. Like you could just type in lady beetle here, and that is perfectly fine. You only want to go to the level that you are comfortable with. For date, you would just go and select whatever date it was that you observed this. But if you took multiple of these photos on the same day, for example, all of these photos I took at the same place on the same day, what you could actually do is click select all at top. And then you see on the details on the side, it says edit multiple species, multiple dates, location. So you can actually go in and, oops, let's try that again. You can actually go in and select a date that you saw all of these, and now you can see that the date has been populated for every single one of these plates here, which is very convenient. And then same thing with location. You have the option to search for a location in the search bar. So you could just type in like your town name or whatever, the road name off of which you are hiking or whatever it is. You're able to zoom in on the map, or you are able to enter a latitude and longitude, depending on what method of searching you want to do. So in this case, I was off of Elladine Road, and you can see that there's this central circle and then this larger red circle. The central circle is where you believe you were exactly when you observed whatever the organism or group of organisms are. And then this larger red circle is the uncertainty. So basically, if you're like, I knew I was somewhere on Elladine Road, but I'm not sure exactly where, you could just make sure that you expand the circle to fully encompass that road. And then that encompasses the entire area where you may have seen these beetles. And then again, you have the option to obscure your location if you so desire, add any notes you want. You can also add observations directly to a project. And basically a project is a curated set of observations in iNaturalist that can be specific to a location such as Vermont. We have the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas on iNaturalist, which spans the whole state. And you can also, you as a interested naturalist can start your own iNaturalist project for literally anything that you want, which is a really great way to have kind of a community initiative to search for either a specific taxonomic group or multiple groups. Anyway, once you are done filling out these fields and editing all of your photos for your observations, you would simply click submit up here. I already entered these on iNaturalist, so I'm not going to submit them, but that is the basic process for uploading photos to iNaturalist. In addition, iNaturalist has a mobile app, which is very similar to the web browser version that I just showed you. It's a little bit less user-friendly. I personally prefer the browser version over the app. However, you have this same Explore tab that has a map where you can click on different observations. You're also able to search for specific taxonomic groups or species. You have an activity tab that goes through both your content, so you can see Pete suggested an identification for a photo that's not an observation photo that's not coming up there, but suggested an ID for one of my observations, and you just get all of your activity there. And then there's also a newsfeed section in iNaturalist. And then you have both a tab that just shows all of your observations and any comments or activity with them. And then there's also a more tab where you are able to access projects and guides in iNaturalist, along with a setting tab at the top. Uploading on your phone is pretty easy, but you have to go one at a time. So if you have a batch of photos you want to add to iNaturalist, again, I recommend the browser version over the mobile app. But you would simply click this camera at the bottom that says observe, and you can either take photos directly of whatever you are observing, or you can go to your camera roll, which I recommend because again, you can only take one photo at a time of one thing in iNaturalist, versus the camera roll option allows you to upload multiple photos. And then from here, you simply can add what you saw. You can add notes, again, all the same options that I showed you directly in iNaturalist. So I'm now going to connect iNaturalist and the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas, because like I briefly mentioned earlier, we have a Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas project on iNaturalist, where we encourage community volunteers to upload their Lady Beetle observations. And when I click to the next slide, just turn your attention to the right-hand side of the slide. I have a map of iNaturalist observations that are going to kind of move through. So these are iNaturalist observations of lady beetles in Vermont over time. You can see how many more there are at the end than at the beginning. This was 2020 versus the beginning of it was the beginning of the Vermont Atlas of Life, which was in 2012. So using iNaturalist and asking our community volunteers to upload organisms that they come across in Vermont, and in this specific case for the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas, we saw an increase of 234 iNaturalist users contributing Lady Beetle data for the first time in 2020. We doubled the number of Lady Beetle iNaturalist observations in 1 year. And now we only have 12 Lady Beetle species missing. Of our over 1,700 research grade Lady Beetle observations uploaded to iNaturalist over all of the years, over 900 of those were made in 2020 alone, which is really incredible. And then just to kind of show the difference between Vermont, which has the Vermont Center for Ecostudies doing outreach on iNaturalist, and to our constituent base asking for people to look for lady beetles. We have this many observations, research grade observations of lady beetles in Vermont versus only 416 in New Hampshire, which doesn't have an organization like VCE really pushing for lady beetle conservation. And you can see like the different number of observers and species listed in Vermont versus New Hampshire. Also, this is what a lady beetle larva looks like. They sort of look like weird prehistoric alligators. But anyway, this slide here is to encourage anyone who is outside of Vermont as well to really be looking for lady beetles, because they matter everywhere and can use your contributions. A couple other findings that we've had through the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas community scientists have rediscovered 4 species that were lost for over 40 years, including the 4-spotted spur-leg lady beetle, which you can see right here on the screen, the convergent lady beetle, undulate sigil lady beetle, and hieroglyphic lady beetle. Additionally, community scientists have found 3 new species of lady beetle which had never been previously recorded in Vermont: the undoubtable lady beetle, mountain lady beetle, and Octavia lady beetle. So just another kind of note on the nature of non-native lady beetles. This is the number of lady beetle species recorded in Vermont in 2020, and you can see that these hashed bars are invasive species and these solid black bars are native species. And the total number of observations of Asian lady beetles, which is an invasive species, well above any of the other species. While Asian lady beetles are typically found and associated with urban environments outside of their native range, which possibly is skewing results a little bit, it just is staggering how many more of them were observed than any other species in Vermont. So our next steps are to increase community scientist participation. And we are doing this, and this is also how you yourself can be involved in lady beetle research. And if you are not in Vermont, again, you can still use iNaturalist and you can still use these techniques to contribute to lady beetle research that is occurring in your region. So what you can do is download iNaturalist and either take photos of lady beetles that you happen to encounter when you're outside or end up in your house or you see while you're walking your dog, really anything. You can very actively search for lady beetles, either just visually, or you can get a net and sweep net, which is basically when you just hit vegetation with a net and knock lady beetles into it. And it's very helpful to have little vials with you or clear containers so you can photograph them in it, and a cooler with an ice pack to cool them down for a couple moments or a couple minutes before photographing them. Otherwise they zoom really quickly and it's very hard to get a good photo. And then for those of you in Vermont, you are able to adopt a survey priority block, which is basically a 3 by 3 mile block. We have them there, they just cover Vermont like a grid, and we selected a representative number of those, which we are asking people to adopt and just survey regularly throughout the season to look for lady beetles. And that should give us a nearly complete representation of lady beetles across the state. A couple quick notes on this goes for insects or anything else that you may be uploading to iNaturalist. It's a really good idea to try and take multiple photos of the organism and do your best to make sure they're not blurry. You can see this beetle was having a zoomy day, so these are not the best photos that were ever taken of a 20-spotted lady beetle, but you can see that I have a photo of the underside of the beetle, of the electra, which are the wing covers, and of the head and pronotum, which is this middle segment here. So basically you want multiple photos at multiple angles, which will help other people be able to positively determine what the organism is. And it is also really important to have an accurate time, date, and location for the observation if you want it to be able to contribute to scientific research, especially. That also helps with identification to a lesser extent, though. And then to finish off, I just wanted to briefly talk about a couple fun lady beetle species in the state of Vermont. The first is the eye-spotted lady beetle. This is an arboreal species, which is closely associated with conifer trees. It grows to be about 10 millimeters in length, so around the length of the diameter of a dime for reference. They eat aphids and are a very important predator of the balsam twig aphid, and have actually been found to synchronize their life cycle with the balsam twig aphid, and will very actively hunt them, unlike the non-native Asian lady beetle, which will just opportunistically snack on balsam twig aphids. There is one study that found that eye-spotted lady beetles reduce overwintering balsam twig aphids by around 30% and would completely destroy aphid colonies once they'd located them, which really goes to show how important these species are as biological control for aphids and other small-bodied insects. Another species is the Convergent lady beetle. These get to be between 4 to 7 millimeters in length and are habitat generalists, but are typically found in fields, including agricultural crops. They are actually sold for aphid control and are slightly tolerant to some pesticides if they're applied at the appropriate rates, but this species has been in widespread decline across the United States. So this is a really good one to keep your eyes out for no matter where you are in North America. And then the final lady beetle I wanted to highlight is the marsh lady beetle, which is 3 to 4 millimeters in length and can be found in basically any damp terrestrial ecosystem, including wetlands, marshes, very like swampy forests, or fields and meadows that typically accumulate a lot of water but then dry out. And they eat aphids and scale insects in these habitats. And that is pretty much all that is known about marsh lady beetles. So they are a very good one to keep your eyes out for, so we can try and learn a little bit more about them as we go. So that kind of concludes my presentation. If you are in Vermont, we would love to have you join us in the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas. You can visit the link here to get more information on how you can participate. We have species profiles of all of the lady beetles that have been recorded in Vermont and a bunch of other information. And if you are not in Vermont, lady beetles still matter where you are, and it would be really great to see your lady beetle observations on iNaturalist, or for you to start your own iNaturalist projects for lady beetles or any other taxonomic group that you are interested in. I'm just really pushing the lady beetles today. So yeah, thank you. And I'm excited to answer questions.
Thank you, Julia. That was a really incredible presentation. So we have a few questions for you. The first of which is, what is the significance of the map marker colors, red, green, blue, question mark? It looks like a dot in the center means research grade.
Yes, so actually I can share my screen and go back to iNaturalist. The different colored dots are different, very broad taxonomic groups. Can you see the correct screen? Do you see iNaturalist right now?
Yeah, I can see your browser.
Okay, cool. All right. Okay. Yeah, so green will be plant species. I think blue might be birds. Nope. Blue is mammals. And then pink is fungi and lichens, etc. And they're kind of broken down, the different colors, by these categories that you have under the filters tab.
Very cool. I've always wondered what that meant myself. So thank you to Carl for asking that question. The second question is, Can you show those 3 mile square survey areas, or where can we find those?
Yes. So let me pop the link into the chat. This is the general link to the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas. There you all go. And to see the survey blocks, you go to Atlas survey block maps, and then just scroll down to the, scroll down to the bottom, and on this map, you see that we have these yellow highlighted squares and then these red highlighted squares. Basically, any highlighted square is a priority block that we use in some of our different atlases that we do at Vermont Center for Ecostudies. And we're really looking to get these red highlighted boxes adopted first. That said, if you live in Vermont and want to do lady beetle surveys but don't want to adopt an entire block, you can just regularly survey in an area that's convenient for you, even if that's like your backyard, or you can adopt one of these blocks with a group of people. And to do that, all you have to do is click on the block, and actually you click on you click to zoom in, and then you can either sign up or you can get a map of the block to see what it looks like.
Thank you, Julia. So the next question, and it looks like it's the last question, is where is a good type of place for a beginner to start looking for lady beetles? Gardens, fields?
That is a really good question. You got it. I would recommend starting to look in both gardens and fields, particularly if you're sweep netting for fields, because it's very easy to get a sturdy insect net and then hit grass and vegetation with that net. Additionally, for like twice stabbed lady beetles, they're very associated with beech bark disease now, as I said. So checking the boles of trees, particularly in the spring, a lot of lady beetles overwinter in leaf litter and will then kind of climb up the boles of the trees or the trunks of the trees before dispersing to wherever they breed and spend their summers. So tree trunks are a really good place to check. And if you happen to find either a tree or some plants that have a lot of aphids, that would be a really, really good place to just scour for lady beetles, because they're very, very mobile and will travel to find different plants that are infected with aphids. One thing, if you want to learn more about these different species in the Vermont Lady Beetle Atlas, you can visit the species profiles. And we have information on all of the different lady beetle species that are found in Vermont, including how to identify them, their habitat, along with more information and an interactive map as to where they have been observed in Vermont.
Awesome, that is a great resource right there. So it doesn't look like we have any more questions. Julia, I can't thank you enough for this presentation. It was really, really incredible and informative. I hope everyone is excited to get out there and start IDing lady beetles. Thank you all for attending today's workshop. As a reminder, we will be having a workshop every week for the next 4 weeks. Next Monday, we have our second installment of our wildlife tracking series. The following week, we'll have a workshop on how to get your backyard certified as wildlife habitat. And then the following week after that, we will have the last installment of our wildlife tracking series, in tune with spring. So we won't have snow to track anymore, but for next season, hopefully you guys are all ready to get out there and track after that. And then the last one will be a workshop on how to get started composting. Same information to register as before, and I hope to see you all at future workshops. Thank you all for attending today.